it is the equivalent of the mafia. You've seen the posts. These are politically connected gangsters, protected by the police, endorsed by politicians. Who in their right mind would come forward? There's not a day goes by where I don't look at myself in the mirror and ask myself, what on earth have you done?
Right. Roger, welcome. Thanks for coming down.
No, appreciate it. Appreciate you having me.
Sad day yesterday for Liverpool.
Well, I just want to win the league. I just want to win and I want to see it in my adult life. I want to be there and see it. So
you should tell that story you were telling beforehand, because I don't think my son quite understands the misery we went through for years with football. It's basically what Manchester United are going through now. We went through it.
And it's great, isn't it?
I mean, it is great. It is the same misery.
No, and the misery of thinking you're good when you're not. And I think that's what they're going through, isn't it? In their heads, they think they're still great, but the reality is they're nowhere near. And we were like that. You were like that for such a long time.
You never know when it's coming back.
No.
And sadly, the last title we won was the COVID year. It didn't feel right.
No, the last game I went to that year was the last league game was when we beat United 2-0. The sun was setting. Mo Salah scored right at the end, and then COVID hit. So I remember that game.
So the first game you followed was on a radio.
My history with Liverpool. So people always ask you, like your son asked me, why are you not an Oldham Athletic fan? It was because my father was a Liverpool fan, and the history of that is very well. It's a nice story. I think the tradition in my family was the eldest son got sent off to serve. So the Second World War came along. The call came on the radio, and my grandfather looked at my father and sent him off. So he walked from his village in Sylhet all the way up to Calcutta, got in a boat, served in the Navy, and of course the boat never went back to Calcutta, never went back to India. It docked in Liverpool at the end of the war. Kicked him off and told him to make his own way home. So that's how we arrived, as a family here. And of course Liverpool, 50s, late 40s, 50s, the city being what it was. And he was a Liverpool fan. So my first memory of football in that way was 1977. I was 4 years old and my dad took me out. And it was a rare thing because he was a man of that generation who worked. They just worked non-stop. And he took me out and he came back with what was a radio. I'd never seen a radio in my life. Sneaked it in the house because he didn't want my mum to see how much he'd spent on a radio, and offered to take me to bed. Never puts me to bed. Never did anything like that. And I'm peering from under the covers, and he's sat in this little pub, and he's got this radio out with an aerial that reaches the ceiling, and he's sat there listening to what was the 1977 European Cup final. So
amazing. Well, I think the kids don't realise that there was a time where we didn't have every game on TV that you could stream on your phone. I remember the first time Tyson fought Bruno. We listened to that on the radio. It wasn't we didn't have it on TV. Me, my dad, and my brother all laying in a bed listening to that fight. I must have been about 5-6 years old, but it was exciting. But now they get every game.
They get
streamed on their phone. But
it's instant. News is instant now, isn't it?
It is instant. Well, and there is a good side to this. Is flips to what we're going to talk about today. Is that someone like you can get out there, and you can get out there and start telling a story. You don't need to own a network.
Oh, well, if it wasn't for social media and our ability to communicate directly with the masses, this cover-up would still be exactly where it was,
Yeah, look, I'm going to admit I don't know enough about it. I know a lot about it, but not enough. I don't know about the background. I don't know enough about the good work people like you have done to expose what's been happening, the cover-ups. And I also feel like the story's gone a little bit quieter recently because I think potentially for certain news sources or certain politicians, it's not the tool they need right now. But I think it's important that we keep this story front of mind. So we're going to be talking about the rape gang, specifically referring to Oldham, because that's where a lot of your work was. But can we go? Can you tell me everything? Can you go back to the start, how you got involved with this crisis?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
scandal, crisis.
For me, it was very accidental, very, very accidental. And I say this at the beginning because I think it's important. I am historically, politically of the left.
Okay.
When I first heard about these rape gangs, I was doing a stint of work in Rochdale, included Rochdale at the time. My background is counter-extremism work.
Okay.
I was an advisor for the government. That's what I did for 20 years or so. And I remember the EDL marching on Rochdale almost every weekend, and they were violent, they were aggressive, and it was very confrontational between the police, and they were campaigning about these rape gangs that had been operating in a neighbouring town of Rochdale called Hayward. And Middleton and Hayward were the first sort of betrayed girls sort of story comes from. I didn't believe it. I'll be honest with you, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a far-right conspiracy. I thought, and even if those things had happened, I didn't believe it had happened for the reasons that these angry white men were claiming, and the confrontational attitudes, the violence that then ensued. I looked and I wanted nothing to do with it, and most people in and around Rochdale, Oldham, all of those places, distanced themselves because of the way in which it was framed and the way it and our disbelief, if I'm honest with you, that this happened in a modern day sort of liberal democracy. This was allowed to happen, which is essentially, now looking backwards, is a systematic gang rape of children, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Is the I think Liz Truss recently made reference to it, and she said conservative estimates of 100,000.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
you can't get your head around those.
No, and you can't. But the cover-up goes. If you start looking at it, it's at least 40 years. It's at least 40 years, and it's from a specific demographic with the same reasons in terms of both the perpetrator and the victim demographic, and the same set of reasons. And my understanding of speaking to people is it's still very much real today. So this isn't crimes of the past. This is still active today. These men haven't just stopped raping children. They've just found other ways of going about what they're doing. Now, I looked at this at the time, and of course I didn't believe it. And then when the evidence was put in front of me, and I objectively looked at it, I felt compelled to do something about it. I have a set of skills. I also come from a background where I believed I'd have some protection. Unfortunately, I didn't. It ended up being that just as anyone else was called far-right and a racist, I also was called far-right and a racist by the very town MP who's neck deep in the cover-up, stood up in Parliament, named me and referenced me as a far-right and a racist. As well as my background being in counter-extremism work, I helped devise the government's policies around community cohesion, racial equality work. I have an MBE for my work. So I found it not contemptuous that I was being referenced that way, but how that sort of mudslinging works and has worked consistently with people. No one I know from my past life of 20 or so years working in that environment will now speak with me. So that's put that in context. For 20 years, I helped safeguard communities, protected children across the country, served my nation across the world, and none of those people from that life will talk to me. And my crime was refusing to look the other way to the gang rape of children in my hometown.
We had Stephen Barrett in here this morning, who's a constitutional lawyer, and he pointed out that right-wing becoming a pejorative is one of the biggest, almost like a crime against us as a country. It's been used as a way to taint the reputations of people. It's been used to get people turn the other way and not look at important issues. This goes beyond just even these rape gangs to a lot of the societal problems we're facing at the moment. If you're trying to deal with them, you're right wing,
and it's something that they use to effectively, and have used effectively for a long time. They're not using it because it's not worked. They're using it because it's worked every time until very recently. And now I say we collectively, I think so many people have just had enough.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stick anymore, does it? When an MP stands up in Parliament and calls a decorated anti-racist who's risked his life safeguarding children and protecting communities from genuine extremists as a far-right extremist, it doesn't stick. when the local newspapers run stories, completely falsify stories, claiming that I've been arrested for child sex offences to try and smear me, it doesn't stick, particularly because the mistake they made was I am of that place. I am of that town. I have a child there. I buried my mother in the cemetery there 18 months or so ago. I grew up there, and it didn't stick. I trained, hundreds, if not thousands of children in that town. I went to weddings, funerals, it just wouldn't stick. And they messed with the wrong person on the wrong issue. Because what I found was the town was crying out for someone to take the risk and speak out on behalf of them and deal with, okay, call me a racist, so what? Call me a far-right activist, so what? Anyone who looks at me and anyone who has an understanding of who I am and what I stand for will know that, it's just another smear.
Well, unfortunately for them, you don't fit into the basket of appearing like a far-right racist.
No. Or
you're a challenge for them.
And that's why I think that's why we've managed to get it this far. So many of you came to this story around New Year's Day when Elon Musk started sharing the letter or reacting to the letter that Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Girls, sent to my council in Oldham. And she rejected calls for a public inquiry into the cover-up of the gang rape of children in my town. That letter that we sent, we forced the council to send, took us 5 years, Peter. So just to give you some context into how long we'd been at it, 5 years. And during that 5 years, I'm political. I come from a political background. I've sat in rooms with prime ministers. So I come from a very political background, and I know how to campaign because I've been taught how to campaign on issues, and I've watched people take over countries using political tactics. So I have a skill set, and I came back into a small northern town with a unique set of skills, and I looked at it and thought, okay, if we're going to deal with this, we're going to deal with this politically. We're going to hit them where it hurts them, which is at the ballot box. There's no point protesting up and down the streets, waving banners, because they know how to contain that. There's no point shouting and screaming, and it just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Signing petitions, none of that works. The only way you work is by making this a political campaign and taking out politicians at the ballot box, legally and lawfully at the ballot box, who refuse to support a public inquiry. And the reason we got to that point was because of a politician who's now no longer with us, a man called Warren Bates. He died last year. I sat at his deathbed. He was a UKIP councillor, in the first round of UKIP when Farage was heading up UKIP. And before that, he was a trade unionist, an old Labour Party man. Like many people who went on that journey towards UKIP and now reform, they're of the left. They're of the old working class trade union sort of left. And he contacted me, and I went to see him. I never knew him. And he put in front of me a dossier of emails, and the evidence was conclusive. The council at the time covered up a network of rape gangs operating out of shisha bars in my hometown. And the leader of the council was a man called Jim McMahon, who's now a minister. He's a government minister. All of this is in the public domain. You don't have to worry about any of this. In terms of me sharing this, they've threatened to sue me many times. They've tried to have me arrested. They've had me arrested. It never goes out to where it needs to end up in court because they bottle it at every occasion because the evidence is conclusive. And the evidence I've had from the outset, and I've used it. And the BBC, a man called Kevin Fitzpatrick, a BBC journalist, conspired with McMahon and his council, his Labour-run council, to keep hidden news of a network of shisha bars being used to groom and gang rape working class white girls. Now, in these shisha bars, they were run by Pakistani men. Matter of fact. And when I published these documents in the public domain and I started campaigning, the Labour Party run politicians reacted and responded the way they have done with every other cover-up. They went to shut us down, and they attempted to try and silence and attack anyone who spoke out against what had taken place.
Is this because of shame, or is it because of fear of their own themselves being accused of being racist?
No,
or are there people
they're
actually
complicit.
complicit?
They're 100% they are complicit. 100% they are complicit. And I'll give you an example. When elderly people in the community read my documents, they got in touch with the council. They went to a council meeting, as pensioners do. And in towns like mine, you had the opportunity to ask questions at a council meeting. You've got to submit the question, and then you get called and you stand at the front of the podium and you ask a question to the councillors. And a disabled pensioner called Debbie Barrett Cole went with a question about the grooming gangs. And is the information Raj and Miah are releasing true? They timed her out so she couldn't ask her questions. She refused to leave until she asked a question. Instead of listening to her question, the council leader at the time, a man called Sean Fielding, marched out every councillor from the council meeting rather than just simply say Raj and Miah is a liar. Called the police. The police turned up and threatened a pensioner and the other pensioners she went with to drag them out of the council chamber.
Why, though? Why not answer the questions?
Because they were complicit in the cover-up. And in a following meeting, he infamously stood up and claimed barefaced lies. His exact words were what I was making reference to was barefaced lies. Of course, it wasn't barefaced lies. And we mobilized an entire community and we removed him at the ballot box. And all the time we're saying to the councillors, have a vote. Get the government in. Call the government in, launch an inquiry. What Sean Fielding did in an attempt to damage limitation. And it gets worse for the Labour Party and the political elite in the North because one small thing led to another. Now it's spiralled out of control. They're in a complete mess. It goes all the way up to Angela Rayner, and I'll get to that in a moment. So along comes King of the North, Andy Burnham.
Manchester Mayor?
Yeah, Manchester Mayor. Powerful figure. He decides he's going to do what he calls an assurance review into the cover-up in Oldham. These things are lies. We'll do an assurance review. It took him over 2 years, I think 3 years, to publish his assurance review. His two experts, Malcolm Newsom and Gary Ridgway, stood up in the press conference with Maggie Oliver there and said, there's no evidence of a cover-up. We found no evidence of a cover-up. This is the government operating for you. This is how the civil service operate. We found no evidence of a cover-up when your terms of reference were excluded determining whether there was a cover-up or not. So the terms of reference were so narrow, they're then answering questions that had nothing to do with what their investigations have found. So we found no evidence of a cover-up because he didn't go looking for a cover-up or whether there was a cover-up or not. This is how the British civil service works, yeah?
Word games.
Yeah. And then they go through what they did find. And they confirmed every allegation I shared. But apparently I'm still the liar. They confirmed Shabir Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang. Infamous figure, known as Daddy. He's due out next year. Yeah. He worked for Oldham Council. They hid that. He worked in a role accessing children for Oldham Council. They hid that. He was a senior figure on the board of the Citizens Advice Bureau. The only people who sit on the Citizens Advice Bureau board in a town like mine are the great and the good of that town. That they still hid in the report. They never released that in the report. I kept that back to see how much they released. They hid that he was an influential member of the Labour Party. In and out of Michael Meach's office, who's now died, the MP at the time, and Phil Willis's office, who was also a Labour Party MP. They hid that he had direct relationships with a whole host of politicians, councillors, who still sit in powerful positions in the town. They hid all of that. But they we forced them to acknowledge that Shabir Ahmed worked for the council, had access to children whilst he worked for the council, and was a member of the Labour Party. And once you go through the report, they also acknowledged that the police and the council, between them, had 9 opportunities to arrest him and charge him. 9 times they let him go. Now, I know why they let him go, Peter. It's because he was powerful. And this was the case consistently with these individuals. And I shared just one article that I want you to share when this goes out. And it's a Guardian report from 2015. So when people say, Raja, it's a conspiracy theory. This thing that children were exchanged for votes.
This one here?
Yeah, this one here.
Alexis J. on child abuse. Politician wants to keep a lid on it. Her devastating Rother report blew open the national debate on child sex abuse. Now the retired social worker is investigating historic claims at an unprecedented scale taken on Westminster, the BBC and the NHS.
Okay. Yeah. So this is from 2015. Yeah, in The Guardian.
Yeah.
As left as you come. Yeah,
as you come.
Yeah. If you go down further along, I think 3/4 of the way down, you will find a quote from her where she specifically references why the crimes were allowed to continue.
And I understand the community in Rotherham would describe this country.
I have an aversion to phrases like that.
Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, I have an aversion to phrases like that.
No, there we go.
Yeah.
So much of the reporting around the J report said that she had accused Rotherham Council and police of failing to tackle sexual exploitation because of misplaced political correctness. Yet J quite deliberately never used that term. I have an aversion to phrases like that, she said. Instead, she believes the Labour-dominated council turned a blind eye to the problem because of a desire to accommodate a community that would be expected to vote Labour to not rock the boat, to keep a lid on it, to hope it would go away.
So this is the most senior child protection specialist in the country. Yeah, Alexis J.
They're doing it for votes.
There you go. And this is what she had. Her own words, Peter, not me. 2015 in an interview in The Guardian, not some right-wing publication. Yeah, in The Guardian, an interview. She won't say it now because she's now, gone further along on her journey. But in 2015, there you have it. They did it to protect votes, block votes.
We should just read the rest of that. There are some people who can only see it as being one massive conspiracy with a single person at the centre of it. That's not the case, she said. It's not possible because these organisations of people were too disconnected. They were connected at a professional level, but they had different agendas. And wow. Fucking hell.
And there you go. That's not me. Yeah, in The Guardian 2015, black and white, they looked the other way. It's not even they looked the other way. They actively covered up what was taking place to protect the block votes that individuals like Daddy, Shabir Ahmed provided. Mm-hmm. And those block votes came via postal votes, and that's another conversation we can have on how postal vote fraud takes place in these communities where the rape gangs are epidemic. They're parallel, but they're complementary. And the reason given in Oldham at the time by McMahon in his email with Kevin Fitzpatrick, the BBC, so the BBC are complicit in this as well, is they wanted to maintain community relations. Now, what they mean by maintaining community relations is maintaining their power base.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
This aligns with what we were discussing before about the two-tier justice system. Have you seen what's come from the
it's outrageous.
Yeah, that the consideration will be given if you're part of a minority group. So that's basically part of this left-wing.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
I mean, justice is meant to be blind, is it not?
Mm.
Is that not what we're always taught?
course.
Irrespective of who you are or where you come from, once you're in there, in the justice system, you get treated equitably. Not, I'm from an ethnic minority background and therefore I've got mitigating circumstances because of your unconscious bias that led me to go and rape a child, so I should be let off. It's outrageous,
It's
right?
just nonsense.
It's just, where does it, and it's all of this is taking place not in isolation. So you've got the rape gangs going on one hand, yeah? You've got the two-tier justice system going on. You've got the way in which the disproportionate punishment of those who committed crimes or are accused of committing crimes or pled guilty to committing crimes in Southport and around that time is taking place. And then, of course, you got Angela Rayner and her backdoor blasphemy law.
Yeah.
You step back and I have to ask you, what is it that they're trying to do? And they are trying to make sure, as far as I see it, is one, people from backgrounds such as mine, so brown-faced Muslims, look at it and think, okay, they need to protect us. Look at, the world, you're all against us, otherwise the government wouldn't be doing this. We should be scared of you guys, so they're protecting us. And at the other end, the flip side, what they're doing with those communities that I describe as white working class, the marginalised, the dispossessed, the underrepresented, they are demonising them in such a way and then punishing them in a way where if you ever speak out, if you ever say anything, this is what you'll get. Shut up, sit down and do as you're told. And that is clearly the strategy that Starmer and the Labour Party have embarked on. And I will quantify why I believe that. It's because they've got a civil war brewing within their own Muslim voter base, as clearly demonstrated by the rise of the Pakistani sectarians, the Islamists, who have now got 4 MPs, led by Corbyn, in that pro-Palestinian group. And in the communities where they were expected to vote a certain way, that voter base is now starting to flex its muscles and saying, we don't need you. We can represent ourselves. And now the Labour Party is having to come back with, because what you've got is something like 80 constituencies, 80 MPs. That's not insignificant. And it's right. And the way demographics work, that 80, in terms of how whether the Muslim bloc vote can influence, and it's their own, something, I think it was called the Muslim Vote, the webpage that came out just before the general election. And they were targeting specific, they listed the constituencies and said, these are the places where the Muslim vote can win. And the Labour Party now have got a civil war on their hands, so they now need to flex their muscles and demonstrate to the Muslim community that they can out-Muslim the Islamists. And then you've got these kids in the background who have been, 100,000 and more, who have been groomed and gang raped. No wonder Yvette Cooper is standing up in Parliament and saying there's not going to be a public inquiry. She's got, one, she needs to protect her own politicians, Angela Rayner, Jim McMahon, Debbie Abrahams, Andy Burnham, all of them neck deep. I mean, Debbie Abrahams is chair of a government select committee. Jim McMahon is a government minister. Andy Burnham is the Greater Manchester mayor. And Angela Rayner is the deputy prime minister. All of them incriminated. With evidence, all of them incriminated. Angela Rayner put her name to Commons letterheaded paper after Burnham's assurance review came out, describing it as the most thorough investigation ever, and we now need to move on. Burnham himself now, we forced, and it's took us years to do this, Burnham himself has admitted that his inquiry was limited. Shall I give you an example of how it was limited? It didn't even interview a single survivor.
What?
Yes, didn't even interview a single survivor. And in the end, it interviewed one person only after the direct intervention of Maggie Oliver. And we exposed Newsom and Ridgway. These are civil servants. They normally get away with writing reports, hundreds of pages, there you go. And the show moves on. I'm sorry, this is my town. These are my children. I have pledged to the people of my town and these children that I will stand by them and that we will see justice done. I read every report. I'm trained to read reports. I read every report. I dissect every paragraph. And we exposed that for the cover-up it was. His two lead investigators, Malcolm Neeson and Gary Ridgway, have run away. They've quit. And now Yvette Cooper has launched these 5 local inquiries. 5 local inquiries led by a man called Tom Crowther. Tom Crowther is a KC. He wrote the Telford report. It held no one accountable. But the way the system presents it, and he's coming to Oldham, and I released a letter this morning, an open letter to Tom Crowther. We will see him off. Just because we're northern and working class doesn't mean we're stupid. We can hold our own, and if he wants to come to Oldham and ruin his reputation, well then let him come to Oldham and ruin his reputation, because we will not allow this issue to be brushed under the carpet any longer. There's 100,000 children across this country who have been groomed and systematically gang raped, exchanged for votes, as confirmed by the most senior child protection specialist in this country, Alexis J. And those responsible for trading children for votes need to be held to account.
But this should end a government.
It should end a government.
It should end a government.
And the reason why it isn't, and I'm grateful to you and I'm grateful to everyone who gives me a platform, is that we have no influence over the mainstream media. They control this, don't they? They control the narrative, and they've been able to control the narrative for so long. And then when it's released, when the information comes out, it's contained and framed in a certain way and it's moved on. This should end the career of many politicians in this country. They sold children for votes.
Yeah. Well, this is why we do this, because we don't care about the mainstream. I barely watch it. I pretty much only watch Question Time now just to see what some of the politicians have to say in a public forum. And occasionally you get somebody like Konstantin Kisin who will hold them to account, which is great. But I felt like the mainstream was scared to touch it. I felt like they were scared to touch the details because the details were so horrific. I've read some of the reports. Horrific what these kids were put through.
And they've censor and hide the sentencing report, because it's in the sentencing report where you get the analysis of what actually happened to these children. Peter, I have a young daughter.
Me too.
You know, I struggle reading those reports. You know, the ones that have come out.
The level of the depravity was unreal. When they were raping them with broomsticks.
Yeah. But what you've got to accept when you step back and look at this is that they legitimize what they were doing because they were racists. These Pakistani men were racist. They are racist. In any other context, you'd be calling them out for being racist. They targeted these white working class girls because they considered them to be beneath them, less human, subhuman, and then they could do what they wanted to them because of their racial prejudices. And sadly, as a Muslim, I said this, and sadly because of their religious interpretation. And no one wants to go there. No one wants to go to the race element, never mind the religious element. And until I'm an anti-racist. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. We trained working class white communities to treat people who are different as human beings. We recognize that in some communities there were a whole host of historical prejudices or active prejudices, and we had a duty to educate people. That same methodology is exactly what should now be taking place in those Pakistani communities where those communities harbor deep-rooted prejudices against white working class communities, and no one will go there. Well, how can you have that methodology that you use in one place and it's exactly the same in another place and you won't use it? Why?
Well, there's a number of probable reasons, but it's stupidity. There is a demand to find racism committed by white people. There's a demand to find white people who are racist towards black people, racist towards Asian communities. We see that. We see it in football. Football's actually done a very good job in trying to stop racism. But we have kind of like a reversal of the racism here, where it's somebody with brown colour skin who's being racist towards people with white colour skin, and there's no desire to deal with it. But racism can work both ways.
Well, if we talk about power, I always thought racism about power. Well, who has the power? And in that situation, the power in towns like mine, the power is with the Pakistani communities, the Bangladeshi communities, the Muslim communities, because of the block vote. Because they've, the effectively blackmailing the politicians in power who've got themselves in bed with these people and now thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And this pattern is replicated in towns and cities across this country where there is a growing Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Muslim community where there's about 15, 20, 25% onwards, because that community votes and it block votes. So it doesn't matter that it can be outvoted by 75% because the other 75%, well, 40% of the other 75% don't vote.
Right.
And then the others vote independently, are split, don't they?
Yeah.
So that vote and the block vote, the way it works is that it's postal votes. It's overrepresented by postal votes, and that's rigged. It's just those postal votes. We call it postal vote harvesting. Black and white, 100% rigged. Elections across this country are rigged. Where I've witnessed it. I've seen it. People go and knock on doors and collect postal votes. And if you don't want to give a postal vote over, someone else will come and knock on your door who's more powerful, and someone else will come and knock on your door. And Asian families, the way they live, there's 6, 7 in a house, there's extended family networks, and men hand over the postal votes.
You highlighted that the scale of the rape gangs was industrial scale. When did you start making the connection that this was happening in multiple towns across the country?
I started in Oldham, and I started speaking out on Facebook, really. It was the only... I use social media for nothing other than wishing my goddaughters happy birthday and stuff like that. And I started posting on Facebook, started writing on Medium. People started getting in touch with me. Have you seen it in Kirklees? Have you seen it in Newcastle? Have you seen it in Rotherham? In what happened in Rotherham? So being who I am and the background I have, I read all the reports. I got in my car and I went and visited places, looked around, and it was the same. It was the same. The pattern is the same. It's why they won't have a national inquiry, because what they'll discover is the pattern in Oldham is the same as the pattern that was in Telford, which is the same as the pattern in Rotherham, which will be the same as in Newcastle, in Huddersfield, in Kirklees, in Bradford. In Bradford, the council keep voting against an inquiry.
Because the pattern is?
The pattern is Pakistani men, predominantly Pakistani men, working class white girls who are seen historically treated with contempt. There's some inter-community prejudice, isn't there, between the liberal middle classes who occupy the public professions, in social work, the police, or whatever, and the contempt towards white working class communities. There's some inter-community prejudices there as well. There's a layer of that as well. And all of that takes place. The politicians benefit from it. The communities who participate in it immune from prosecution, and they get away with it and get away with it. Those who are prosecuted, they're in the handfuls, and they tend to be the first tier, because this is a multi-tier operation, and the first tier are those who groomed them and then took first dibs on the girls. And I don't mean it disrespectful, but I'm trying to articulate in a way where you understand where I'm trying to take this. But then they traffic the children. And what they traffic the children to hotels, to rooms above takeaways, restaurants, all documented, all proven.
Mm-hmm.
Men would be queuing up to take their turns. None of those men queuing up to take their turns have been prosecuted. They are paying customers. And what these men who were trafficking the children were doing is that they were basically funneling and engaging in the same systems and processes as to how they dealt heroin. And there's a historical connection in this country with the heroin trade and the Pakistani community. Again, proven.
So it's also a business for them.
It's a business. It's a business. They are taking children on demand, ferrying them in taxis to different parts of the country where they're pre-booked and men are waiting. And if you go back to the Alexis J report, she references in that interview, and that interview is gold dust, really, because she gave that interview before it became political in the way we have. So it's on record. She makes reference to not just a particularly a Pakistani men, but she makes reference to a Kashmiri community and how they're from 3 specific villages in Rotherham, and they're all interconnected. So this is an extended family of men who are gang raping children. It is the equivalent of the mafia. You know, where a small group of people took overrepresented in terms of power. And these, if you looked, and no one wants to go there, Peter, because it takes you into a dark place. I will say to you, okay, Alexis J makes reference to those 3 villages. Let's list those 3 villages now. Yeah, let's list them. Mirpur, whatever, let's list them. And then let's look at not just the men who are in the grooming gangs and see if there's a correlation. Let's look at the men and the women who are in the council chamber from that background and see if they're linked to those villages. Let's look at the MPs.
Has somebody done the spiderweb network? No. That work needs to be done.
Yes, it does.
Charlotte Gill's been doing it with her UK dog.
Oh, she's brilliant, isn't she? And I've got so much respect for the way she's gone about stuff.
But she's now doing that spiderweb of connected networks of funneling money to stupidity. Someone needs to build the spiderweb.
It's a conversation I've been meaning to have with Peter Whittle, I think, the new culture guy, because they've got a think tank attached to what they do, and he's the man to do that, I think.
Did he message me today? He did. Peter Whittle messaged me today. A superb speech at the Oxford Union from Peter Whittle of the New Culture Forum on Pakistani rape gangs, labourers attack.
I went to see him. Yeah.
And how we endured mass immigration against our will.
No, he
messaged me today.
There's so many of us who fundamentally agree now. It's gone too far. It's gone too wrong. And decent people, how do civilizations fall? It's when decent people look the other way and ignore. And we have a responsibility. You, I, all of us have a responsibility. This isn't, and if you want to criticize my faith, go ahead. My faith is spiritual, it's internal, I'm comfortable with it, yeah? I was raised in a world where if you can't criticize, if you can't have a discussion, what's the point? And that's why the blasphemy stuff really concerns me. It's why Angela Rayner's blasphemy stuff really concerns me. And that came from an MP called Tariq Ali, if you remember, standing up in Parliament and asking Keir Starmer, who responded positively, yeah? The reason he did that was that the Labour Party Muslim MPs need to take something back into the Muslim communities to show that the Labour Party is on their side because of what took place over Gaza and the way in which the Islamists are now mobilising in these communities. And it's a civil war, but people don't see it. From the outside, it all looks like...
I think people are seeing it because people like you have connected the dots. And so I think people are seeing it. There just isn't enough action on it just yet. Just to jump around a bit. The role of the police in this, because the police really should be independent of the politicians. You would expect the commissioners, the chief constables, the police officers themselves to be politically neutral, identify a crime, arrest, recommend to the CPS for prosecution, and then prosecute.
Let me share you my experiences of the police. And remember, I come from a background in counter-extremism. I've sat in rooms with some of the most senior police officers in this country. I have a positive relationship with I have a positive view of what I believe the police should be. So I'm not anti-police. I'm not one of those ranting...
No, and I don't want to throw them all under the bus because I know there's good police officers out there.
But I come from that. The first time I engaged in this with the police was the local DCI. Jim Faulkner was his name. Decent policeman. 100% decent policeman. Came and saw me. We had a conversation and he went away and started doing his work. The last time I saw him, the conversation essentially was, Raja, I'm moving on because I'm not comfortable with stuff. What?
What does that mean?
My house was dawn raided by 8 police officers. And I was arrested for being a racist. 8 police officers. I've not got a criminal record. None of that. I share my house at the time with my 6-year-old daughter and a Lego collection and a teddy bears. 8 police officers dawn raided my house. of the instructions of, at the time, leader of the council, a woman called Arooj Shah, Labour Party. Used to work for Jim McMahon. They interviewed me, put me under house arrest for 6 months, released information to the newspapers that ran the story that I'd been arrested as part of a child sex exploitation investigation. Malicious lies after lie after lie. The evidence when it came showed that they hadn't even interviewed any of the people who made allegations against me before they arrested me. The police officer, the senior police officer involved, made it very clear to me that if I continued to campaign and talk about these issues, they'd lock me up. I got dragged from courtroom to courtroom for 3 years. During that time, they arrested me again and again. Dawn raided my house. Politically motivated persecution, all because they wanted this covered up. 2 months ago, after Yvette Cooper announced her 5 local inquiries, a senior police officer from my town, retired now, got in touch with me. Detective Chief Inspector level. So, senior enough level. It'd been playing on his mind for so long, devout Christian. He had to share it with me. And I put him onto a national news channel. I'm sure that story will come out. But essentially, he went after the rape gangs. He got hauled into a meeting and warned by senior police officers to back off because, quote, they've got a good thing going with the community.
What?
Yes. So these girls didn't matter. In the end, these white working class girls didn't matter in the...
It's because they're working class, right? If this was middle class... or
Come on, have you seen the Me Too movement? And
if they were recruiting these kids outside private schools...
Yeah.
Because they, poor...
White working class, held with contempt, and what... And, I grew up in the 70s amongst... If people are looking at me and saying, well, why does he care? I was raised alongside these people. I grew up in the 70s in white working class communities. They raised me. My oldest friends are from those communities. Now, we might have used words with each other that perhaps we won't use now because it was of a time, but we had nothing but love for each other. And I have a duty and a responsibility to their children and their grandchildren and their communities to fight for them. If it was middle class children, not a chance. I have on my phone testimonies from mothers and children of children who were dragged into cars outside school gates.
Didn't they accuse some of the girls of consent and others of prostitution?
They used the term child prostitutes.
Yes, child prostitutes, which is the worst. It's the worst way. It's the worst way of flipping it. How can you be a child prostitute? If you can't if you can arrest a 16-year-old boy for having sex with a 15-year-old girl, and you can call that statutory rape, you cannot use the term child prostitute. It's just rape
with 12-year-old children.
Fucking mad! It's just rape.
12-year-old children. There are stories in my town. There's a school. It's closed down now. It's called Count Hill School. It's called Count Hill School. And I evidence everything. It's called Count Hill School. The pastoral staff were going and rescuing children who hadn't turned up for school from houses that they knew they'd be at where men were queuing up for them. And when they reported it back, those reports disappeared. When Andy Burnham came along to investigate, he knew he had to investigate schools. You're doing a review into the industrial scale gang rape of children in your town. Would you not include schools as part of your remit of what you go and investigate? They excluded schools.
Sad thing is, I've always heard that Andy... I'm not a Labour guy. I'm a small C Conservative. I've always heard that Andy Burnham has been a good mayor.
He's neck deep in the cover-up of the industrial scale grooming and gang rape of children. If that's your camera, anytime you name the place, Andy Burnham, because your police repeatedly falsely arrested me. He knows. He's engaged with me on X. He's called me a liar. Sue me.
important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
Well, and it'd be very, trust me, as someone who's been through a 5-year libel lawsuit, you can be arrested. You can be in a civil lawsuit for years over tweets. And so if they thought they would have a case, they would.
They've wrote to me. The Labour Party lawyers, Brabners, they recruited. The Labour Party wrote to me threatening to sue me. I wrote back to them and said, I'll see you in the High Court. Nothing. Because I am not here as some ranting lunatic. I come from a background of expertise where I've dotted the I's, crossed the T's. I have the evidence. As I've shown you, a lot of the evidence is in plain sight. You just miss it.
Manchester Police had the evidence. They had the intelligence, right?
Manchester Police, Greater Manchester Police, lost the minutes of the meeting where they approved to close down an investigation into 97 members of the rape gangs.
They lost it.
They lost the minutes of the meeting where they decided to close down an investigation that was actively tracking 97 members of the rape gangs. Alongside that, in that meeting was also Manchester City Council. I've worked with Manchester City Council. I know their systems and processes. They also claim they lost the minutes of the meeting. And no one says anything. No one says anything, Pete.
Yeah, Roger, this is where I've become sympathetic to Tommy Robinson. And I believed the entire public constructive view of Tommy Robinson. And I'm sure he hasn't got a perfect background. I mean, I don't. Who does?
Oh, who's perfect?
No. But I now am pretty sure that he has been targeted and silenced.
I was meant to go and visit him in prison last week, but they cancelled my visit.
They cancelled mine.
Yeah,
well, they didn't even accept mine. They rejected it because I'm a journalist. Which, by the way, is hilarious because shouldn't journalists be able to visit prisoners to check on them because there are miscarriages of justice? And you know, funny thing was, I put out the letter that said I was rejected for journalism, and there were people saying, once you've committed a crime, you shouldn't... here it is. Dear Mr. McCormack, visit at HMP Woodhall. Thank you for your request to visit Mr. Yaxley Lennon at Woodhill on the 4th of March. Based on security information indicating your visit may be used for journalism purposes, your visit has not been approved. I mean, I wasn't actually going for journalism purposes, but now I want to go for journalism purposes. And the thing is, the people who turn around and say, citizens who will say, well, he's been convicted of a crime, he shouldn't have access to that. Yes, in a world where there's no miscarriages of justice, maybe that is something you shouldn't have. But actually, because there can be miscarriages of justice, journalists should be able to visit them. This is one. You do realise there's no right for a convicted inmate to be able to give interviews. Firstly, I wasn't going for an interview.
No.
I was actually going to have to, I don't know if you had this, I was going to have to sign an NDA that I wouldn't talk about, and I was happy to do that. Okay? But you need to be able to talk to these people in case there's miscarriages of justice.
Listen, I've never met the man, and people ask me, and I share with you, I'm historically of the left. When I first came across Tommy Robinson, he was the EDL, causing issues in Rochdale. I didn't like what I saw. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know. And I look at him and I think he's clearly been on a journey, and he's still on a journey. And whether he'll get to a place where I hope he gets to, I don't know. But that's the conversation I wanted with him. That's why I wanted to go and see him, because he is, whether he likes it or not, he is the voice of so many people who I speak to, who feel marginalized, demonized, as someone who believes in democracy, believes in the greatness of this country. We've got to take our people with us. The working class built this nation, regardless of what people want to recreate in our new narrative that's woke and all of that. And I look at that and I think, okay, he has a responsibility. And that's what I wanted to share with him. He has a responsibility to not march 1 million people or more into oblivion. He has a responsibility to reflect on his own journey and recognize and accept he has a role to play, another chapter. And he has to take people with him to a place where they inform and shape the future of this country, their country. And that's the conversation I wanted to have with him. And it was no different from the conversation I had with people who came out of Robben Island in South Africa, you know, political prisoners who themselves, the Maze prison in Northern Ireland, who themselves went on a journey from being adversarial, violent and all of that, and then realizing actually we need to find a way in which we and the people we represent can live and shape the future of this country rather than be demonized and disenfranchised forever.
Well, we have to beat them at their own game.
Yeah.
We need it through our own media and our own political... You've identified the political efforts. I'm identified the media.
Agreed?
Because I'm not regulated by Ofcom, so they can fuck off. And I don't care. I can say what I want. And I can bring on whoever I want. And we can start to reach bigger and bigger audiences. More and more people will tune in to shows like this as they realise they're being bullshitted to either by the mainstream or the mainstream are just avoiding subjects. But we can sit here, you can tell me exactly what was done to these young girls. You can explain in graphic detail if you need to, so people hear it, so they get angry to deal with it. But we have to beat them at their own game. You're right, we have to beat them in politics, but we have to get better politicians in there. People with a backbone and integrity to deal with this. Because what you're saying, what you're essentially saying is a scandal that spreads from the local councils to the national government, to the CPS, to the police service.
The CPS were neck deep in the cover-up. And I can evidence it. The CPS were neck deep in the cover-up. And the mainstream media, this is an industrial scale cover-up. You know, where all elements of the establishment mobilized to protect each other.
These people need to be prosecuted, not just removed from power.
And that's my position and has been my position for some time now. You know, I talk about justice. And when I talk about justice, it is multifaceted. One is every survivor needs to be compensated. You know, in the way I think Canada did it. Every survivor needs to be compensated significantly. Those who failed their children need to be dealt with. And those who are complicit in the cover-up need to be treated exactly the same way as those who gang raped these children. I see no distinction. You know, if you're involved in the gang raping of children, you've committed a crime. And if you're involved in the cover-up, you've also committed a crime.
You're complicit.
Yeah.
How do we get more transparency into the process of these investigations so that the investigations and or the people doing the investigation are we're ensuring that they are asking the right questions and not constructing something to get the results they want?
We're not there yet, Peter. We're not there yet. The government, Yvette Cooper, has just announced a series of local inquiries. The Conservatives grandstanded for a while and, you know, opposed them, and now they've just gone quiet because, you know, there's no political win in it. Reform, they're too busy squabbling amongst themselves, sadly, disappointingly.
I know,
yeah,
so sad to see.
And in that vacuum, the establishment is getting on with business as usual. And business as usual means a man called Tom Crowther, which I referenced earlier, KC, led the Telford inquiry. Mate, it was just a masterclass in how to cover up.
What did the Telford inquiry find?
It found there were all sorts of failings, consistently failings. It found everything that we made reference to, but it avoided holding anyone accountable.
So is this the main thing that you want to see, is the accountability?
Surely you want to see people named?
Well, I think you want a number of things. You want to stop this happening again, for sure. You want to learn.
So they say lessons have been learned consistently.
Yeah.
I have yet to read a report that lists and documents the lessons learned. If the lessons have been learned, what did we do wrong before? And what is now in place to make sure that the mistakes we made before are not taking place? It's a simple chart, isn't it? It's a simple, you know, this is what we did before. This is now what's in place to safeguard it. And this is how we can measure it to make sure that the system we put in place is working to prevent from that. It's a simple, straightforward chart that a low-level civil servant could document and produce and send out everywhere. They're just playing with us.
See, I can't remember the detail, but I do remember seeing a Keir Starmer interview where he talked about the lessons that have been learned and certain changes, policy changes, or things that have changed to try and prevent this again.
Let me tell you about
I can't remember
Telford.
the details.
Let me tell you about the Telford. one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Yvette Cooper stood up and made reference to it. Great, Telford, lessons have been learned. Do you know what they highlighted as one of the key changes? We now put CCTV in taxis.
Okay.
That.
So they just stopped using taxis.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So, but the accountability, I think, is one of the big issues. There's this weird thing where with censorship has a chilling effect, or libel, lack of free speech has a chilling effect. Imprisoning people for memes has a chilling effect. But we could have a chilling effect on people who have leadership roles in our institutions by holding them accountable. If we hold accountable people in the police who are complicit, people in the CPS, people in local councils, other people in those roles will know that if you make a significant mistake, you could face prison time.
And not a single person has been held to account.
Not
a
one.
Single person in public office has been held to account. Over the now confirmed because it was used in Parliament. When the speeches happened in January in Parliament, I was so relieved. As someone who's been on this journey, I was so relieved because finally we were seeing Kemi Badenoch, other opposition MPs, senior MPs standing up and saying what we've been saying for so long, and then they used the phrase systematic industrial scale rape of children across the country.
Is it still going on?
I spoke with a mother just before Christmas, came out and found me and said, Raj, I need to talk to you because my daughter, she has 2 daughters. My daughters are being targeted by a grooming gang. She came and sought me out and she shared the story with me. And she has, she's Muslim and her children are very Western and liberal. So what these grooming gangs have now done is they've evolved, Peter. And they're not just targeting working class white girls. They're also targeting Muslim girls that they believe do not conform to Islam. So if you follow the history of the grooming gangs, it started with the Sikh girls. And the Pakistanis were targeting the Sikh girls, the Hindu girls, before they moved on to the white working class. So what they've got here is that layer of anyone we consider to be less than is fair game. So yes, it's still going on, but the demographic that they're targeting is now wider, and it's becoming very clear. It's anyone it's not just racism, it's that anyone we don't consider to be Islamic enough. And of course, you carry that through, and where does it take us? No, because you can't criticize it if Angela Rayner gets away, because I'd be deemed to be Islamophobic. You'd be deemed to be Islamophobic, and there'll be a new law sooner rather than later on that.
Yeah, but we're not Islamophobic. We're against the
gang rape of children.
Yeah, against the gang rape, which is, I think, a perfectly reasonable position to held.
I was arrested as a racist and tried as a racist.
You were tried?
Yeah. The case collapsed. Case collapsed in court. First of all, the leader of the council ran away and refused to testify, even though she had me arrested. And then she had one of her gangster mates, make up stuff about me. And she helpfully transcribed. So I do these YouTube educational videos. If only a few hundred watch them, nothing grand like yours. But I have educated a small town and politicized a small town. And this woman took offense to what I'd said, and helpfully transcribed what I'd said for the police. And the police accepted her transcription of what I'd said. The CPS then accepted a transcription of what I'd said. They withheld the video for 2 years. And when they finally shared the video with me, and I had the video all along, but it's not for me to provide their evidence, it's for them to provide their evidence. It turned out that the transcription that they had, she just made it up. And she went on holiday when my trial date was, and the case collapsed. They tried to have me tried, the CPS tried to have me tried where they accepted her evidence without it being cross-examined. And I'm sat in the dock watching all of this play out before the case collapsed.
Is there hard evidence that connects the cover-up to votes within the Labour government? And have you considered yourself whether you could fund any form of civil prosecution against anyone who's complicit in this?
In terms of hard evidence for the transfer, no. In terms of we looked the other way, it's circumstantial. Yeah, it's that, and the relationships these men had with the Labour Party, and the relationships these men had in terms of the vote controlling, harvesting postal votes, and the prominent positions they played in the community. So there's that. There's also in terms of evidence, there's clear evidence that the politicians themselves made reference to terms such as community relations and what Alexis J referenced as to a voter base that they didn't want to upset. So all of that is documented. Now, that takes you 8/10 of the way there. And I can't see any other reasonable conclusion you can come to. So that's where that's at. In terms of evidence, or in terms of civil prosecutions, I don't see it like that. We've got to force the government. We've got to corner the government and force them into a public inquiry. And if not a public inquiry, for me, this is...
Do you know who you'd like to lead the public inquiry?
Oh, I'd put Maggie Oliver there straight away.
Okay.
Someone that can
She's
be trusted.
been amazing, yeah.
Someone that can be trusted, yeah?
Yeah.
I'd put Maggie Oliver there straight away. And I'd say, okay, Maggie, who do we want as our team? Yeah? I'd put in senior police officers who've spoken out against this and have been reprimanded. And, there's a whole tier of them. I'd put in the politicians. Even things like the Rotherham politician, what was her name? I've forgotten her name. She spoke out and she got in trouble, didn't she? The Labour Party lady. She spoke out. She got in trouble. The Telford MP.
Can you look that up, Con?
It'll come to me. The Telford MP. The Telford MP gives an interview not so long ago. This is the Telford MP. Was she called Allen? I think she was called Allen. Her surname's Allen. Will you type that up and just have a look for the Telford MP? Sarah Champion is the Rotherham MP. Yeah, the Telford MP.
Rotherham MP champions back national grooming.
Yeah, she got. She basically got sacked.
So the Labour MP for Rotherham, Sarah Champion, is back to national inquiry into grooming gangs. Champion said that so nothing less than a full inquiry will restore faith in our safeguarding systems. Her call comes after tech tycoon Elon Musk comments, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So is there anything on her? What happened to her
she got
after
sacked.
this?
She got sacked when she first brought it up a few years ago. Jeremy Corbyn was in charge. They sacked her.
Can you find anything on her being sacked, Con? Yeah. I mean, this is like a house of cards that quits Labour front bench over rape article. Here we go. Labour Shadow Minister Sarah Champion has quit the party's front bench after criticism over a newspaper article she wrote about grooming gangs. Rotherham MP wrote in The Sun on Friday that Britain has a problem with British Pakistani men raping and exploiting white girls. She has now apologised for her extremely poor choice of words and quit as Shadow Equalities Minister. Jeremy Corbyn said Labour would not demonise any particular group. Ms. Champion, okay. In interviews following the convictions, the Labour MP said such crimes involved predominantly Pakistani men and said a fear of being called racist was hampering the authorities' investigations. I mean...
It gets worse. Lucy Allen. Type in Lucy Allen. Telford MP. Or was the Telford MP Conservative?
Okay.
She got threatened by police officers. An MP got threatened by police officers.
Under hate speech laws?
No, they came round and threatened her for speaking out. She talks about it.
I'm just lost for words with all of this.
You want your MPs to represent you, don't you?
You want your MPs to represent you.
And you want the police to protect you.
Your police to protect you. And then you want your journalists to expose when them two are failing.
Yeah.
And we failed on all three of those. All three of those. And it's just... I mean, you talk about civilisational collapse. I mean, it does feel like we're in some slow death of our country.
I feel that, as someone whose father, I shared the story of how my family came in. I'm loyal to, this is my home, and I will fight to protect it. And I've been to places in the world. I've worked in places in the world where it's fallen apart. And when it falls apart just like that.
Do you find anything on this?
No, not on the threaten.
Lucy Allen?
Lucy Allen,
Yeah, can't find anything.
I'll send it you.
Have you got it?
I've got the video. I've got the interview and all of that. Lucy Allen.
Where is it? It's on YouTube or?
I'll find it. I'll find it and send it you. I'll find it and send it you.
Yeah,
but
please do.
she talks about, and in this journey I've been on, I start to doubt what I've read and what I've come across. But I'm very clear. I document everything. And she was threatened. She gives an interview where she talks about how she was threatened by the police. The police visited her at her house.
Is this
to warn her off?
Is this still going on now? Like,
Well,
will I be threatened for this? Like, or is it so out there now?
It's too out
They're
there.
so they're hiding.
It's too out there now. I know now. There was a time where every morning I'd wake up in a cold sweat, thinking my door's going to be kicked down again. And once Elon Musk and that came out, we knew. For me, that a ceiling had been broken, and this is now in the public domain. And now they can't arrest any of us in the way they have been before. They can't target any of us in the way they have been before, because it's too out there.
There must be a lot of people out there shitting themselves now, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of the inquiry, 5 local ones.
5 local ones with a total budget of £5 million. Telford on its own cost, according to Crowther himself, in the region of 5 million. So 5 inquiries at £1 million each, with no statutory powers to go after the evidence, no powers to compel witnesses to testify under oath. It's a continuation of the cover-up.
So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com. So a national inquiry, I do know one of the fears is how long it would take and how difficult, and could we be years down the line? And
it's 3 years. 3 years simultaneous.
Could it be a completely transparent process where there are public interviews where people are held
That's
to
what's
account?
going to happen.
Because someone wanted to interview you, right? And you said that you would only do it if it was recording live stream.
Oh, no. I when they wanted to interview me, I knew the game they were playing.
Yeah.
By that point, I knew that Andy Burnham had set up his inquiry, his assurance review, where his investigators and I would sit in a room and they'd have a note taker. And the note taker would take selective notes of what they felt was important. And I said, that's not how testimony works. You record my testimony, and my testimony then forms an appendix in the report that comes out. And whatever you extract from that, you extract from the full testimony. They refused, and they reckoned that the method was that they would take selective notes. I obviously grandstanded. For me, I'm on a political journey here. I grandstanded and said, no, this is not how I'm going to do it. You can interview me in front of 100 people if you want, or you can have it in a way where you record my entire testimony. And if you refuse either of those, then I'm not playing ball with you. They spat the dummy out. They then interviewed some other witnesses, key witnesses, and 2 other key witnesses refused to sign off their testimony. One was a councillor called Hughie MacDonald, the most senior Labour Party councillor in the town at the time, with child safeguarding responsibilities, chief magistrate in the town for 15 years or 20 years. So this is a man with impeccable record. He was demonised, sidelined for leaking a letter that demonstrated the cover-up that was taking place, and he got effectively sacked. In his sacking was not just Jim McMahon, who was the leader of the council at the time, but a man called Tony Lloyd. Tony Lloyd was on his journey to becoming Police and Crime Commissioner. He recently died as the sitting MP of Rochdale. And then the previous Rochdale MP, Simon Danchuk, has come out on record and confirmed that Tony Lloyd told him to keep his mouth shut about the grooming gangs because it would lose them votes. It's all there. It's all there.
This Jim McMahon character,
Ex-leader of Oldham Council,
he's tried to
now
smear
MP.
you.
He's tried to have me arrested. People associated with him have openly endorsed my murder.
What?
Yeah, 100%. The police have record after record of outright threats inciting my murder, and they have protected these individuals repeatedly to this day.
He accused you of He accused you of
being a far-right racist.
Yeah, and an incentive for political gain.
Yeah, political gain. So
is that because you've tried to use? Because you've tried to use the political system to remove these people, therefore that's why he's making that connection.
Yeah, and his power base.
Yeah.
So he's from, he's the MP for Oldham. He was the council leader. They play a very effective role in the communities I come from of promoting key individuals. I call them kingpins, cartel members, involved in dodgy brown envelopes, sort of council grants. That low-level stuff you find everywhere. You scratch my back and in return I'll fund a community centre. The council where I came from secretly funded a mosque. Unheard of. We exposed it. Nothing came of it. They gave an interest-free loan on a scrap of paper that no one can find. 80,000, 100,000 transferred of some land that was clearly real value was so much more. And in exchange, he'd turn up to the mosque and he would attend parties. Again, on X, we've proven all the documents where he'd go around thanking people for all the votes.
What can you find on this Jim McMahon con? See what you can find on this guy.
So he was the leader of the council at the time, okay? And there was let me send you the key document. Let me send you the key email and bring it up. Yeah, I've got that, so I can send you that.
All right, here we go. So this is Kevin Fitzpatrick. Who's
Kevin Fitzpatrick is the BBC reporter, BBC Northwest main political sort of, yeah.
Okay, and so he's emailing Jim McMahon when he was a councillor.
Leader of the council.
Yeah, and copying another
So Councillor Gene Stratton was the deputy leader of the council and a whole host of other key individuals.
Someone from the police there as well.
Yeah, police were there, yeah.
Okay, hi Jim, I'm emailing to clear up some confusion about what I'm told you and colleagues at the council understand to be my involvement in a recent story about child exploitation for BBC Radio Manchester. As you were, last month I was passed some information about concerns about private clubs in Oldham and suspicions about CSC child sexual exploitation taking place inside them. As a responsible journalist, I made inquiries with both you and GMP. Who's GMP?
Greater Manchester Police.
Greater Manchester Police. Despite contacts in the Asian community confirming to me that there were concerns about young people going into these clubs, at the request of Greater Manchester Police and the council, we agreed not to broadcast anything after you told us that knowledge about the activities at these clubs was very limited and you were concerned about tensions in the town ahead of Lee Rigby's funeral. You assured us that this wasn't being ignored, that you were monitoring the situation should be taken and action should be taken. We would be the first to know. Well, firstly, I think that's damning on the BBC.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I've said it right from the outset. But carry on reading it, you'll see why.
On this basis, I agreed to hold any story on the private clubs for the time being. I've been true to my word. I've only discussed the story with my news editor, Michelle Daniel, and no one else at the BBC Radio Manchester. However, I've come back from 2 weeks' holiday to be told, Jim, that you're of the opinion that I was also behind the request for the child sexual exploitation figures, and that this is somehow a continuation of my request for information on private members clubs. This is not the case. A colleague at Radio Manchester, Jonathan Arley, has spent the past year covering the fallout from the high-profile child exploitation court case in Rochdale, and he has covered the story extensively and professionally, often with the cooperation of Rochdale Council. Following Tony Lloyd's statement that stopping child sexual exploitation was his priority as the Police and Crime Commissioner, John thought it would be good to establish how many children in the city region were currently considered to be at risk, and so began contacting councils, including your own. That is a legitimate request. How else would the public know next year if Tony Lloyd had achieved what he set out to do, and if they didn't know what was the starting point was? All 10 councils gave Jonathan the information, and the story ran this yesterday. The story didn't mention Oldham figures individually. This request is in no way linked to the private club story. I had no involvement in it. I want to make it clear that when I said I would stop pursuing the child sexual exploitation story about the private clubs, that is what I said. That said, I should make it clear that if I get more information which suggests there is child sexual exploitation taking place at these private clubs, then I'll be back in touch. I feel my integrity is being questioned, so I hope this puts the record straight. I've always had a good relationship with your communications team and be very disappointed if your misunderstanding damaged the trust between us. Okay, I mean, this is fucked up in itself. I don't think this is a great email from the guy from the BBC. I can't remember his name.
Kevin Fitzpatrick.
That doesn't reflect well on him because he allowed the council to influence him to bury a story. So that's not cool.
So after that, from that, when Andy Burnham's report came out, I think 18 months, 2 years ago, the assurance review, buried in the report, it's buried in there, so you've got to pull it out, and in there is confirmation that for 3 years, those shisha bars, evidence for 3 years those shisha bars were dragging in children and gang raping them.
What are the numbers for Oldham itself? What are the statistics?
They hide them. They won't say it.
So you still don't know?
We still don't know. So what, I say hundreds, I say thousands. Yeah? For instance, I say those figures. They say, well, you're way out, Raja. Well, then give me a number.
I mean, one shisha bar gang raping one child should be enough for a story.
In Andy Burnham's assurance review report, there's a statement from a police officer confirming that he saw children being dragged off the streets.
Can you bring that back up a second? I just want to go back to one of the points on that sorry.
You'll see maintaining community relations. You'll see they used the funeral of Lee Rigby to hide behind.
There was one bit that stood out to me. Sorry, just zoom in. As you were last month, I was so scroll up to the top. Sorry. It's a response I made across with you. Despite contacts in the Asian community confirming to me that was concerned about young people going into these clubs, at the request of Great Manchester Police and the council, we agreed not to broadcast anything after you told us that knowledge about these activities as clubs was very limited.
Well, that's a lie.
Well, but even so, what he's saying here is he's saying that Jim McMahon said to him that knowledge about these activities at the clubs was very limited and concerned about tensions. He wasn't saying it wasn't happening.
No.
He's saying knowledge about this limited, so let's essentially keep it limited. Let's keep a lid on it.
And not just keep a lid on it. When I went after him and Burnham protected him, his assurance review team protected him, they used a blog post he wrote sometime later saying he did everything possible. In 2013, no one read blogs, never mind the blogs of a council leader. Yeah. And the word counts, because it's written in WordPress, you can still see the limited number of people who've read that, even after, we've publicized this. Now, what took place there was he had a window of opportunity from when that email went, and there's acknowledgement there, or insinuation there, that he already knew, because knowledge was limited. So he already knew about this. When did you first know about this? When did you say something about it? And what did you say about it? As the council leader, the council had a duty to inform schools and warn schools. There's a network of shisha bars. Children are being dragged into these places and groomed and gang raped in daylight, has been proven. So they were meant to inform the schools. That never took place. As a council leader, you're meant to stand up in the council chamber and raise concerns. This is what's going on here. We need to do something about it. None of it took place. You could release it. You could do a press statement. There's a whole host of things you had a duty to do, you didn't do, and you kept it hidden.
It's that line that, what are the words? There's limited knowledge of it. And that's quite sinister, because that says to me, it's not that it isn't happening. So they know it's happening. There's limited knowledge, and at the advice of Did Andy Burnham mention that?
No, this was before.
The council and the Greater Manchester Police.
Yeah.
So,
Limited, and you were concerned about tensions in the town.
yeah.
There you go.
And so, what are you really concerned about? You're concerned about, the police are concerned about reflecting on them, and the Labour-run council are concerned about reflecting on them. What's his job now?
He's a minister in the government. He works underneath Angela Rayner. He's the local government minister.
What?
Not only
That's so ridiculous. It's funny.
Not only is he the local government minister, the Labour Party, I don't even know, the government are introducing a new range of powers, introducing powers which will censor opposition politicians from speaking out.
Okay, there's loads to deal with.
There's another layer to this. So they've announced new powers.
It's the Labour co-op MP for Oldham West, Chatham, and I mean, how can he still be an MP for Oldham after this?
And an OBE.
OPE. Oh my God. See what? Can you just add to your search, Connor? Rape gangs. See what we find about him. Right. Revival ignores local action. Elon Musk says hidden grooming scandal. I want to find something. Do you know what? Kick Grok up. Have you been using Grok?
No.
Grok is
Good.
base. Grok is base. Grok doesn't. So just say, what do we know about Jim McMahon's connection and potential cover-ups with Oldham rape gangs? Probably going to get myself in trouble now, but fuck it.
Oh no, I ran for MP against him, and I posted through every letterbox. I had Royal Mail, because Royal Mail have to post your electoral leaflets. I had Royal Mail post through every letterbox my evidence showing that he covered up the gang rape of children.
So Grok's really interesting, because I've been using ChatGPT a lot. I listened to an interview that Elon Musk did with Joe Rogan. He was talking about the reason he did Grok is that a lot of the other AI tools are going a bit woke. And he
I get it all the time. I like violation. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, I've developed this because I want it to give you the truth, however uncomfortable it is, even if it's uncomfortable about him. So, okay, scroll to the top, Con. See what it said. There is limited publicly available, verifiable information directly connecting Jim McMahon, the British politician, Labour MP for Oldham West, to rape gang cases or potential cover-ups. Most of the discussion around this topic stems from allegations, speculation, and sentiment expressed on social media platforms, as well as some independent blogs and articles. These sources often lack conclusive evidence that should be treated with caution. But let's just scroll down. The review found that a 2022 independent assurance review, which you talked about, the review found that while there were failures in protecting vulnerable children, there was no evidence of a deliberate cover-up by council or police to suppress the issue of political or racial. We've literally just seen the email.
Thank you.
So that's bullshit.
Thank you.
The review found that, however, critics, particularly on platforms like X and the alternative media, have pointed to McMahon as potentially complicit due to his leadership role during that period. He either knew about the grooming activities and failed to act decisively, or actively worked to downplay them to avoid political fallout. One specific allegation references a leaked email, there you go, purportedly showing McMahon collaborating with council officials and media to minimise public awareness of the issue, such as by claiming limited knowledge of grooming activities. The assurance review, while acknowledging awareness of such location, contradicts the notion of coordinated cover-up, suggesting instead the failures were due to systematic issues rather than internal. But that's bollocks. We've seen the email. Yeah. The controversy resurfaced in early 2025 when Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips rejected calls for a government-led inquiry into Oldham's grooming scandal, prompting figures like Elon Musk to criticise Labour figures, including McMahon, for alleged inaction or complicity. Posting on X in February 25, accused McMahon of trying to influence the terms of potential future inquiry.
He did.
Implying a conflict of interest given his past role. These claims remain unverified by officials. McMahon has publicly positioned himself as an advocate against crime and exploitation, emphasising on his website his efforts to combat cuts to policing and youth service. Well, that's a completely different point, which he argues have exacerbated gang-related issues in Oldham.
Also, because we didn't have a youth club, meant that they went and gang-raped children.
But this says these are largely anecdotal or based on unconfirmed sources like ex-posts and independent blogs. We've seen the email. Is that
It's
email?
just one of many.
Yep. So there are other emails.
Yeah.
And have we got the other emails? Hold on. Can we Freedom of Information Act all these emails? Or have you already
No,
done this?
what you need to do is if you go on if you type in recusant-9.com, people say, well, you never evidenced this. I evidenced it at the time. There should be something called Welcome to Oldham Part 3. RECUSANT 9NINE.com.
Welcome to Oldham.
It should be Part 3. So I used to write.
Keep going down. Kind of the other way. Yeah, keep going. 4, 3. There we go.
So this goes dark. So what you've got is a council leader. So McMahon is in charge of the town. He's got a council leader that's called Arood Shah. Arood Shah is neck deep in the criminal underworld in the town. The photograph at the top, if you look at if you go back up, if you look at the photograph at the top, that's her brother, the young man, convicted money launderer. And the guy next to him, and you can see they're wearing red Labour Party rosettes, is a guy called Zia Hussain, convicted for kidnap and torture. Used a broomstick to shove it up a young man, filmed it and all the rest of it. When the police turned up, they found blood splattered all over the walls. One of the key Labour Party henchmen in Oldham. Okay?
I mean, these are nasty people.
No, these are...
Are you safe?
Yeah. No, you'll see. Carry on. You'll see there's that post. That's Mohammed Nadeem, one of her henchmen.
I'm not into politics. Rouge.
He's making reference to me.
I can't make sense of anything you're saying.
Believe me, they won't be voting ever again. That's a threat to kill me. She's posting love hearts. This is the leader of Oldham Council, Andy Burnham's equality lead, and ready for this? Chair of the National Constitutional Committee of the Labour Party.
Hold on. Sad day when you find out local lads are egging this gay Christian convert.
So that was trying to have me incitement, because if they claim I'm gay, if they claim I'm a Christian convert, Islamically, it means they can come and kill me.
Right, okay.
Yeah? Again, these guys are protected by the police.
Okay. Are there more emails?
You'll get to the emails. That's a guy called Irish Shimmy, Dale Cregan, the cop killer's getaway driver. So has a relationship with Arood Shah, the leader of Oldham Council. That's the cop killer's getaway driver.
This is madness.
Yeah. So this is McMahon out at the same time, campaigning, and he's campaigning with him. You can see Irish Shimmy campaigning with him. Try Part 4 then. There you go.
Here we go. So is that the email you just showed me? No? Which one?
There's a whole host of emails you can know.
Hayden Roberts? Who's that?
Hayden was the senior police officer at the time.
I mean, there's a lot. Which one should we look at? What's this from the community? The council's daily also correct. Who is... scroll up and touch. Who... So Hayden Roberts is who?
He was a senior police officer at the time.
And Teresa Broadbent is?
Was in charge of child protection in the council.
Hi, Teresa. This is the premises I mentioned in the last LSCB. This is a real emerging safeguarding issue. We're arranging for joint patrols with police and college staff at key times. There are now several premises, which are formerly pubs, that seem to operate as venues available for hire for private parties.
Okay, just pause your reading on that. Limited knowledge. Here is a senior police officer to the most senior safeguarding person in the council saying what? Does that read like limited knowledge?
No, I think my read of the limited knowledge is what he's saying. There's limited public knowledge.
Oh, limited public knowledge.
I think they're accepting there's knowledge within the institution.
Oh.
I read that as this limited
so
public
they want
knowledge.
to keep a lid on it.
Yes, keep a lid on it. That's why I said there's limited public knowledge, because when he then talks about Lee Rigby, they don't want to have community tensions.
So they want to cover it up. The risks around CSE are massive. Do you see that line?
Yeah, the risks around child sex...
That's a senior police officer.
Massive. These types of premises are really active on Facebook, etc., using marketing employees to get people to make contact with them. And I'm sure if a young girl with a nice profile picture, you'll get targeted with lots of random messages as invites. They know what's going on. So this is the intelligence they talked about. This is to Hayden Roberts from who? Go back to TouchCon. From Teresa. Hi Hayden, you may be aware that some of the concerns about the premises on King Street opposite the Star Inn. Huey alerted me earlier today to information received about young women seen entering the premises and concerns over the use of the premises. Huey is keen for the LSCB to be receiving regular monthly reports on child sexual exploitation, including monthly reports on police activity to prosecute disrupt. Okay. Oh, this is endless.
And then they went after Huey MacDonald and they got rid of him.
I just cannot get my head around. I cannot get my head around this. Has anybody within the mainstream press deep dived into these
They won't
things?
go near it. So even like I get on with them. GB, Charlie Peters has done amazing work.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, he's brilliant.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
I speak to him regularly offline. I send him stuff. I send him stories I know are too big for me to handle. I said, Charlie, please speak to this guy. They won't have me on. They won't touch any of this. No one will touch any of this. The evidence we just shared now, the evidence you've just shared now, I've got reams and reams of it.
But that is specifically asking a journalist not to cover something, and the journalist agreeing because of limited knowledge on public tensions. That is the definition of a cover-up.
Thank you. The definition of a cover-up. Yeah, council leader at the time, now a government minister. I've sent you something else. Have a look at something else I've sent you, and you can bring this up.
I mean, right. Let me share this to you, Con. All right, you should have that. I mean, he should. I mean, I don't think he should be in the job he's in, but he should at least be under investigation now for a cover-up. Because that's certainly a dereliction of duties. I don't know if there's a specific crime.
This is the cover-up complete,
Okay.
or has he saw it? So this is after Andy Burnham's report came out.
So this is, to people listening who can't see this, following the publication of the Oldham Independent Insurance Review this morning, myself, Debbie Abrahams MP and Angela Rain MP have released the following statement. Can you just zoom in a touch? Debbie Abrahams MP, Jim McMahon MP and Angela Rain MP have released the following statement in response to the publication of the Oldham Independent Insurance Review. This is one of the most comprehensive safeguarded reviews undertaken, and we welcome the recognition of the progress that was made in Oldham in shining a light on disrupting and tackling child sexual exploitation and raising awareness to increase reporting. It is an uncomfortable and disturbing fact that abuse takes place in every city, town and village, and Oldham is not immune from that. The vast majority of victims are well supported and professionals are working hard to meet increasing demand and changes to the nature and pattern of abuse as it develops. However, the report is clear that not all victims receive the report they deserve, and one victim let down is one too many. Our priority has always been supporting the victims, and as MPs we will continue to support victims' right to justice when the system falls short. Today's independent review identifies that whilst these incidents are not current cases, there's still work to be done to ensure an offenders face the full force of the law, and the passage of time should not be a barrier to justice. This independent review also addressed head-on the false and often politically motivated conspiracy theories that claiming grooming gangs were operating under the protection of senior politicians. The review was clear that there is no basis for these accusations, and we are pleased that the report draws a line under this. We hope today allows trust in the system to be rebuilt, so the victims who have not already come forward have the confidence to do so. Well, that contradicts the email.
So it's not just that. There's two things though. One is the first thing is the most comprehensive report of its type. The first line. Angela Rayner, put a name to that. Commons letter-headed paper. Angela Rayner is now Deputy Prime Minister. The assurance review, it took us 2 years, relentless campaigning during this time. Just not, banging on my head against a brick wall, relentless campaigning. And what? We've now forced Andy Burnham to admit now, because politicians know how to look after themselves first before anything else. Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, has now confirmed his assurance review, that these people said was the gold standard. He's now confirmed his assurance review was limited. And now, in the wider discourse, because of what's gone on, we all understand that this assurance review did not have the powers to go after the truth because it did not have the statutory powers to go after the evidence or to compel witnesses.
I don't think I'm going to get Angela Rayner in that seat now. I don't think she's going to want to answer these questions, but the email alone should be enough to trigger an investigation. Because again, I don't know if a crime is committed there. If it is, I don't know what the crime is, but it's a dereliction of duties.
Well, the assurance review proves in the detail, and I'll send you the links to it because it's a massive report. The assurance review proves in its details that for at least 3 years, it only covered 3 years, the assurance review, but for those 3 years, it confirms that children were being gang raped in these shisha bars. 3 consecutive years. And you telling me the leader of the council did not have the responsibility to stand in a council chamber and warn parents like myself that your children are at risk?
Well, parents need warning. Journalists need to be able to do their jobs. Councillors need to be... The police need to be investigating. Councillors need to be, doing the warning as well. And
let me add something else. And then it comes out, they've hidden it, but I know 100% one of those shisha bars was owned by a councillor.
Oh my God. Oh. I don't understand why this isn't... I don't understand it, Roger. I don't understand it.
And that's why I wanted to, that's why, because...
Thank you.
Because I'm like, am I a madman?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Am I a madman?
Yeah.
Because this is just insane. There are clear crimes being committed, and that to me is very clear evidence of a cover-up. This is not widely known.
And
they always use that bloody excuse, community tensions, racial tensions. They don't want to...
But and I say this as a brown-faced Muslim from that town, there is no man who looks like me or woman who looks like me from my network of friends, and it's extensive, who would look the other way. If we saw a child being, we'd go and you'd do what you do.
Well, do we need more people like that? Do we need more coming from the Muslim communities, the Pakistani
how
communities?
Can you? Look what they've done to me. You've seen the posts. These are politically connected gangsters, protected by the police, endorsed by politicians. Who in their right mind would come forward? There's not a day goes by where I don't look at myself in the mirror and ask myself, what on earth have you done? Why didn't you look the other way? Not a day goes by.
So what should happen now? What needs to happen now?
The only way through this now is a public inquiry, is a national inquiry. And the only way we're going to get that, and I say this to people who support me, this journey has took us 6 years, 5 years, we're in our 6th year. It's took us 6 years to get this far. Well, we're having conversations, and it's not just in a small town where they've contained it. It's now nationwide, it's worldwide. People, everyone who has an understanding or interest in these issues. We're not lying, we're not far right, we're not extremists. There was the industrial scale cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of 100,000 children, if not more. These were racially motivated crimes, and the political establishment sought to cover them up, including Alex S.J. confirming it was done to maintain a power base, a vote. We now know those as facts. We need a national inquiry. This government will not give us that national inquiry.
How do we force it through? There must be a way.
Well, we vote in a government that will, and that is where, I've spoken with Rupert Law directly. I've spoken with others in senior reform. I've spoken with senior Conservatives. The Conservatives are playing with this. I say this not because I'm not a Conservative. I've got friends of mine at a local level, brilliant grassroots Conservative councillors who've been threatened by the police for speaking out about this. Nationally, the MPs, the Conservative Party is in disarray. And I don't think they want to touch this. And they had every opportunity to deal with this for 14 years. And I found the interview you did with Liz Truss very telling. I felt for her. I felt for her. And I looked at her and I think we need to look to a future where there are politicians in power who will fight for us and fight for these communities and right this wrong. Because it is a national shame. It is a national shame what's took place. And I look at this and I think, well, there's got to be a government. If we don't win the next general election, we've lost. That's how I see it. If you don't win the next general election in 4 years or 5 years' time, this country will go down a road where the likes of you and me and people like us are increasingly sidelined and isolated.
Well,
and I look at Reform, I look at Rupert Lowe, I look at Farage, I look at that fallout, and I want to pull my hair out.
stop fighting, guys.
Yeah, and I want to put because this is bigger than all of us. I have a friend, and I call him a friend, Dick Tenconi, UKIP guy. Like, far too right for me. You know, in terms of political beliefs and the way they adversarial tactics and stuff. But this is the conversation I have with him. My house is on fire. My children are in that house. I'm not going to argue with who comes to help me put the fire out. You and I can have a straightener afterwards and settle our differences. But right now, we've got to put the fire out and get those children out of that house. And that's how I see the situation now in our country. We can settle our minor differences, and believe me, they are minor differences afterwards. And reasonable people come to reasonable conclusions. You don't become an extremist overnight. You know, you talked about Tommy Robinson, and you don't become an extremist overnight. There are things that happen, and I'm not one to judge people. And I believe that with the right will and the right intention, people that we consider to be extremists now, they've got to where they've got to for a reason, because there's been nowhere else for them to go. And this is one of the reasons they want me out of this space, is because I position myself in a place where those who otherwise would go to an extreme place find somewhere else to have hope. And the hope we try and give is say, look, we will force this national inquiry. We'll hold these people to account, but we'll do so with a government who will work with us. I'm not here to give you a quick answer. There are no quick answers here. And I genuinely think we keep this in the national spotlight. We'll make sure that it's politically relevant, so it's a vote winner. Sadly, you know, that's what it's got to be. It's got to be a vote winner. And because it's a vote winner, people will vote on this issue, as well as a whole host of other issues. And then the government that comes in honours its promise and delivers a national inquiry, and then make sure that everyone involved in the cover-up is put in prison.
Don't stop, man. Raju, don't stop. This is wild. I can't believe what the things you've told me today were. I knew some of it, and I was aware of some of it. I mean, that email alone is ridiculous, and I don't honestly, I'm lost for words. Yeah, it's going to sit with me for a while. I have to think about this one.
I'm grateful that you got in touch. I know I look at people like you. We've never met before today. You sent me a message on X, and we've been trying to make this happen for a few months. And without people like you, we'd be lost.
No, without people like you, we would be lost. I've had to give up 2 hours of my time for you. You've given up your life for this. Keep going. Keep doing it. Yeah, and be safe. But yeah. Leave this one with me. Let me have a think about what more we can do.
Thank you.
Keep going. And people, we'll try and share all the links in the show notes so people can do their own research, because it's a lot I need to go and read there as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
No, I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.